All right, everybody, I am back with a brand new movie review. I just got back from seeing Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, and that is probably the best way to describe this film. It is definitely a saga about the life of Furiosa. And I'm going to come out right before I get into this review and tell you, no, this is not Fury Road. And if you're expecting to go in to have a movie that was like Fury Road, you are going to be sadly mistaken. This film is once again directed by George Miller. And I believe when he was out making the rounds and in an interview, he said there would be one more film that would butt up against Mad Max Fury Road. But there are a couple things that happen in this movie that leave you scratching your head if that is to be true. Now, this movie is definitely more grounded in, I can't say reality because that's not what these movies are. In fact, that last movie, I think, was lightning in a bottle. This one doesn't equal that in any stretch of the imagination. But this is a more grounded film, there's more story to it, let's put it that way. And so there's a lot to go around. Now, the good news is this movie is 2.5 hours, and I never once got bored. But that doesn't mean that I didn't look at my watch a couple of times, because I did. And it's definitely a long film. And I think this movie would have been better served as a mini-series where they could have really gotten into the characters a bit more. We definitely see we get a large portion of the cast was in Fury Road, and you'll see that in the film. And I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. At the end, I'm going to talk about one aspect that I thought was really weird that's going to get into a little bit of spoiler territory, but nothing major. So we do have a large number of the cast from the last film come back because this does definitely tie in with Fury Road. Now, at the beginning of this movie, we get to see the young life of Furiosa when she was in the Green Place. We also get to see the Bullet Farm and Gas Town in this film to a large degree. I mean, we really get familiar with them. And you get to see the factions that are going on in the wasteland. Now, the one person that is definitely being introduced in this film is Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth. Or not Chris. Yeah, is it Chris? Chris? Yeah. Whichever of the brothers. I believe it's Chris Hemsworth, yes. He plays Dementis in this movie. He is the main antagonist. And he was by far the character that probably most matched the tone and the feel of Fury Road, while everybody else around him did not. Now, what's interesting about this is Furiosa was played by a young girl at the beginning, and then there's a big time jump, and we see Furiosa as played by Anya Taylor-Joy. And what's interesting is you don't see her until almost an hour into the film, Anya Taylor-Joy, even though she's the bigger part of Furiosa and the one closest to the character we saw in Fury Road. And in this film, you see her become Furiosa, the Furiosa we know and see in Fury Road. What's funny is every time she talks, it wasn't her voice. It was actually Charlize Theron's voice, which I thought was interesting. And one thing I noted, well, before I talk about that, I want to talk about my score, and then I'm going to talk about the kind of weird scratching your head thing that I noticed in the film. So first of all, the last film, Fury Road, if you saw my review that was up, I just put it up earlier this week, I gave that film 5 stars. That, to me, Fury Road is a perfect film. It's wacky. It's out of this world. It's entertaining. It's going to keep you gripped from beginning to end. It's got a crazy cast of characters, a crazy world. Just everything works. It's definitely a perfect film, and I don't give 5 stars to films very often. That one did get it. This film, I'm going to knock it down a whole star, simply because it was nowhere near as gripping and as engaging as Fury Road was. There's some action in this, but this movie is definitely more story-driven, And in that regard, it's a better film than Fury Road. Fury Road was kind of on the surface. And like I said in my review, I still stand by the fact that Mad Max Fury Road was more of Furiosa's story than it was Mad Max. It just happened to be a story where Mad Max was in it. But he definitely wasn't the main character. Furiosa was. And that is true here as well. She is the main character. But Chris Hemsworth, as Dementis, he has quite a bit of screen time as well. And the dynamics there are very interesting. So at the end of the day, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't run out to see it. I'll see it. My wife does want to see it. But after that, I probably will purchase it on 4K. But I won't go back to the theater to see it. I don't think it has the rewatchability as Fury Road did. Now, let's talk about the weird thing that left me scratching my head. So if you've seen Fury Road, there is a scene in there where Furiosa ends up going back home and meeting with her people. And the girl that she meets at the beginning of Fury Road, well, not at the beginning, but when she gets back to where she was at home, you actually see her as a little girl in this film. And when they meet each other in Fury Road, she says it has been almost 7,000 days, if I remember right. Almost 10 years. Or not 10 years, close to 20 years. Well, in this film, she's very young at the beginning, like maybe 10 years old, maybe a little bit younger than that. And then there's a time jump, and she looks like she's about 15 or so. And there's a scene in here where she makes a comment to one of the characters that it's been 15 years since the events of leaving, the green place. But then there's a scene at the very end where it must jump 5 years because it does butt right up against Fury Road, which is kind of weird, the way they do the jump. You wouldn't know it. It doesn't make sense. And there's actually a scene in there where we kind of get a glimpse of Mad Max as he was at the very beginning of Fury Road, but that's prior to the point where they do that massive time jump that would put it right up against Fury Road. So I thought that was a little weird. It didn't make sense timeline-wise. And if anybody else has seen it, what are your thoughts on that time jump? Clearly, there's something off with the timeline. And I do believe that George Miller did say that there was going to be another film prior to the events of Fury Road, but this didn't leave room for that. They could squeeze something in there, but I think the way they did this, it would have been a perfect companion to butt right up against it. But at the same time, I wish there would have been more to fill in that gap, and I would say it would have been better served as a mini-series on something like Max than a theatrical release. This is something I would have rather seen as an episodic type thing on Max rather than going to the theater to see it. So what are your guys' thoughts? If you've seen it, what did you think? At the end of the day, I really enjoyed the film a lot. I would give it 4 stars, but it is not as entertaining as the last film. All right, guys, we will see you on the next review.